All of us growing up in the 60s, and I think this is true of people growing up in the 70s and 80s too, and we had a almost kind of list of things that we expected to happen. I remember really well, calculating that I would be almost 40 years old in the year 2000, and of course by then we would be on Mars, and there would be anti-gravity boots and flying cars and teleportation devices and warp drive and tractor beams and all that stuff. And I really think it's one of the experiences of my generation and much of the ones after have been this experience of incredible disappointment, which we can't express. Maybe it's unrealistic to imagine we could have gotten all of them, but we didn't actually get any. Not a single one. Things that you would really imagine actually were technically possible had they pursued it. I mean, if they could get to the moon by 1968, presumably they could have gotten to Mars if they'd really been trying. Or robotics. It's presumably not absolutely impossible to build a robot that could take your laundry down, wash it, and bring it back again. But, this sort of research simply hasn't been done. So I think that almost everyone has grown up with this sort of secret disappointment, but also a secret shame because they feel like idiots ever having really believed that they should have this to begin with. So we can't talk about it. The information revolution, when it was originally conceived, was actually going to be accompanied by new forms of energy, robotics, and essentially new technologies that would make work obsolete. And if you read people writing in the 60s, almost all radical thinkers had embraced this. Take a science fiction fan of the 1950s and show them the internet, they would have been impressed. But then if they found out that was the best thing we'd actually managed to come up with, what would their reaction likely to have been? But, this thing is basically, it's fast and it's convenient, but it's basically a combination of a post office, a mail order catalog, and a library. Oh, that's it. And what about the computers you can talk to? The robots that could think. How do you explain that? And I think the only way to explain that is bureaucracy. What happened was there was a fusion of educational, corporate, and government bureaucracies. I think most of us who have any experience of academic life, know what's been going on. And this is increasingly true of everyone. I mean, it's true in what I do, which is social theory, right? Where all we do is apply for grants and assess things and assess each other and write letters of recommendation. And there's this massive outpouring of paperwork which takes up more and more of your time. There's other things. There's the privatization of research results that we could go into in great detail. The period of the Industrial Revolution, the 19th century, the period of the really greatest technological advance and change, were not periods of large corporations. They were periods of very small family firms combined with high finance. And much of the first half of the 20th century was a battle between America and Germany to see which would replace the British Empire as the sort of new hegemon. But both of them embraced very bureaucratic forms of capitalism in contrast to the British form. The corporation really comes out of both. And corporation is, intrinsically bureaucratic organization, and that's the moment where technological change really slows down. And if you look at where did a lot of these discoveries actually come from in the UK? They didn't come from large institutions. A lot of them came from things like rural vicars. There was a sort of eccentrics of society. They put them somewhere where they only had to do something once a week, and they would study the insect life or work on their strange theories of whatever it might be. And 90% of them were completely crazy, but 10%, that's where the patents came out of. That's where discoveries largely came out of. You want to actually, come up with an unexpected breakthrough. What do? You get a bunch of creative people, you give them whatever they want, whatever resources they need, and you leave them alone for a while, and you come back, and most of them aren't going to come up with anything, but one or two are going to come up with something you never would have imagined. If you want to make absolutely sure that innovative breakthroughs never happen, what you do is you say, okay, none of you guys get any resources at all unless you spend most of your time competing with one another to convince me that you already know what you're going to discover. So there we go.